I think there's a little bit of an honesty that's needed for a very long time. And I don't know, maybe it's for our social construct. We have taken the approach that we need to save the nature. We need to save the world for some benevolent reason. I think there is a little bit of a lack of honesty in that. If we pack up and leave tomorrow, go to Mars or somewhere else, this planet will be pretty. It's going to be fine. There may be some ups and downs and changes, but it's going to be fine. It is, as a concept, it's going to exist. So then what are we talking about? We're talking about our mere survival and success as a species, using and utilizing the resource, I shouldn't say resources, the bounty of this space, this world, this earth. So that's the honest relationship. We are essentially an extractive force on this planet for the success and thriving of our own species. From that point of view, and you're honest about it, then you think, okay, so if this is the function that we are kind of trying to build and thrive on, then it behooves us to pay attention to what's being destroyed and what's being recreated and what's being lost. Because the continuation of some of those processes is directly linked to our mere survival. So if you're not paying attention to that, we're actually working against our own interest. So it's a mother nature in a way that, mother feeding an infant, we are that infant. Our whole survival depends on that mother's caring, paying attention, and keeping us through, all these challenges of survival. That relationship I understand. We saving this Mother Earth in one way or another, that relationship I don't understand as clearly. And I think when we move past that and have that honesty with ourselves, we probably can interact with what we need to do as a species more clearly. Our previous director at the lab, Dr. Fitzpatrick, and in one presentation he said, no matter who you are, whether you care for birds or not, that's besides the point. Just think that each bird is a sensor, and it's sensing its surrounding, its world, in all different places of the world. So you have these billions of sensors all around the world. So, and he was talking about bird as an organism, but then you take that and apply it to acoustics or bioacoustics. We're eavesdropping into the channels of communication of all these different species, and increasingly the technology and our data processing capacity is going to a place where we can really do that at a very large scale, if not at the global scale. We still may need to go a little bit farther to do that. But just imagine that we're eavesdropping into the channel. Then apply that to that sensing of the world and the biological world. And by sensing that, and if we could elevate that to this understanding, that could open up a area and a kind of a knowledge that could inspire or change, or kind of have it almost like a threshold shift in our understanding and knowledge. And that's the kind of space I want to imagine, that by paying attention, by understanding this hidden channel, like I'm hearing birds all day long. If I could understand, their life, livelihood, history, and, their kind of, the psychosocial kind of parts of those communication channels, I think it could open up a window to us that, again, could be a threshold shift for us. And that could be a place where we probably build more empathy towards that organism or the system. We apply better mechanism to create a coexistence between them and the human interests, and then potentially, in the future, kind of allow them the space to both thrive and have the cultural and vocal richness that their species and their organism offers. So that, in my opinion, is the kind of the imagination space that I can think of right now.
I love the way you brought up the idea of frame of reference, because when I think of putting words together like bioacoustic and imagination, on the one hand, I actually kind of find it both liberating but also really inspiring. So so much of biology as a science, or in this world that Sheik and I are in, of what we call sensory physiology, thinking about how animals sense the world around them. In many ways, it was constrained by a highly anthropocentric frame of reference. So the idea that you had anatomists in the 1800s say, well, when I go swimming, I can't smell underwater because water goes up my nose, but I can't smell anything. Fish can't smell. Whales can't smell. And it's like, you look at a fish, it's got nostrils. It has a really well-developed olfactory bulb in the brain. Like, of course it can smell. Just because a human can't do it doesn't mean, the fish can do it. I think, and it's the same thing with ultraviolet light. Humans have a fairly narrow visual wavelength spectrum that they can see. You've got birds and fish that are seeing ultraviolet light. You've got reptiles that are sensing infrared. So the way that animals perceive themselves or perceive the world around them is so much broader than what humans can do. Even terms like ultrasonic or infrasonic are specifically centered around the frame of reference of the human frequency range that we can hear. And so the idea of saying, okay, when I think of something like bioacoustic imagination, I think of what are all the weird and wild and wonderful ways that animals are using sound that haven't even occurred to us yet. So how are they picking up on, centuries or millennia of evolutionary history through vocalizations? How are they picking up on context? How do they know where one animal is calling from or what the context is, and getting past what is, our view of animals being, in some ways, just simple automatons of having a stereotyped sound that sounds like this and it's all the time, and these are relatively simplistic organisms, and instead saying, how might all of these things have evolved to greater understand the world around us? We think that acoustic communication has been around for hundreds of millions of years. It certainly predates the evolution of humans. So why should we define what animals can and cannot do only from the perspective of what humans can and cannot think about? And so, for me as a biologist, having devoted my life to this, it's all about the imagination and the inspiration of trying to understand how do animals work, how can we understand them, and how can we use that knowledge to better improve the resilience and conservation of the planet.
Sometimes when you get deep into science, we don't allow ourselves to get into those spaces. But honestly, I can speak for many of us. Probably I shouldn't, but we come from a space of inspiration to the space of science. And in our previous conversation, I was talking about like art is a form of expressing and making science accessible in many ways. So I think we need to allow ourselves once in a while to get to that, connecting back to that inspiration space, because that gives our science so much more meaning in a way.